Tell me, Black Waitress, what do you think about our $40 million deal? Should we invest? The laughter hit Natalie like a slap. 6 billionaires in suits worth more than her yearly salary, mocking her over $400 wine. She should have walked away. Instead, she spoke. No, sir. Meridian is a shell company. You'll lose everything within 6 months. The laughter died. Gregory Ashworth's face twisted with contempt. Did the help just give us financial advice? Someone get the manager. This girl needs to learn her place. Around the table, heads shook in disbelief. A woman whispered to her companion, both snickering at Natalie's worn uniform, her calloused hands, her audacity. But Kennedy Webb wasn't laughing. He stared at Natalie with the sharp focus of a predator who had just spotted something unexpected. Wait! His voice silenced the room. How does a server know what a shell company is? The crystal chandeliers of Le Monarche cast fractured light across white tablecloths like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in the kitchen, a sauce reduced to velvet perfection. In the private dining room, 6 men in suits worth more than most people's cars laughed over glasses of wine that cost $400 a bottle. Natalie Robinson moved between them like a ghost. Her black uniform pressed sharp against dark skin, her natural hair pulled back tight enough to ache by closing time. 18 months at Le Monarche had taught her how to become furniture. Present enough to refill water glasses, invisible enough that powerful men forgot she had ears. And tonight, those ears caught everything. The Meridian deal is locked. The speaker was Gregory Ashworth, CEO of Ashworth Capital, his silver hair catching light as he leaned forward with the hunger of a man who smelled money. Their manufacturing capacity alone makes this a gold mine. We're looking at 40% returns within 18 months, gentlemen. 40%. Natalie set down a bread basket, her movements practiced, silent. Her eyes moved across the documents spread between wine glasses and appetizer plates. Profit projections, factory schematics, a glossy prospectus with Meridian Industries stamped across the cover in gold leaf. She saw the numbers, and something cold settled in her stomach. The question, continued Arthur Randy, hedge fund manager and frequent guest of the private room, is whether we move before the public offering or wait for the first quarter reports. Kennedy, you've been quiet. Kennedy Webb sat at the head of the table. 63 years old, net worth $16 billion, founder of Webb Industrial Holdings. His presence commanded the room the way gravity commanded planets, absolute and unquestionable. He swirled his wine, studying its legs against the crystal. I'm calculating, he said simply. Natalie refilled his water glass. Her hand was steady, but her mind raced through figures she shouldn't have understood, patterns she shouldn't have recognized. The numbers in that prospectus didn't add up. The manufacturing output projections exceeded capacity by at least 30%. The subsidiary listed on page 4 had been dissolved 18 months ago. She remembered reading about it, remembered the layoffs, remembered the protests outside their downtown offices. This wasn't an investment opportunity. This was a trap baited with gold. Kennedy Webb looked up suddenly, catching her gaze before she could look away. His eyes narrowed, not with anger but with something sharper. Curiosity, maybe, or the instinct of a predator recognizing another predator's attention. You! His voice cut through the conversation like a blade. Girl, what's your name? The other men turned, noticing her existence for the first time. Natalie felt their gazes slide over her uniform, her skin, her position. She felt herself being categorized and dismissed in the space of a heartbeat. Natalie, sir. Natalie. Webb smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tell me. Natalie, since you seem so interested in our discussion, what do you think about the Meridian opportunity? Should we invest? Laughter rippled around the table. Gregory Ashworth didn't bother hiding his smirk. Kennedy, really? The poor girl probably thinks Meridian is a type of pasta. More laughter. Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks, but something else rose too. something she'd buried for 3 years beneath aprons and order pads and the constant grinding weight of invisibility. "No, sir." Her voice came out steady, clear. "I think Meridian is a shell company running an elaborate pump-and-dump scheme, and if you invest, you'll lose everything you put in within 6 months. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next." The silence that followed was absolute. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. Forks hovered over plates. Gregory Ashworth's smirk curdled into something uglier. "Excuse me?" His voice dripped with contempt. "Did the waitress just give us financial advice?" Natalie should have apologized. Should have backed away, eyes down, deferential. Should have protected the job that paid her rent and kept food on her table. But the numbers burned in her mind, and 3 years of silence pressed against her throat like a scream. "Look at page 15 of your prospectus," she said, pointing to the document near Arthur Randy's plate. "The factory in Cleveland. According to your projections, it's producing 8 million units annually. But that factory was condemned by OSHA 17 months ago. It hasn't produced anything since. There's a structural audit report. You can find it on the city's public database. Building code violations, foundation damage. It's been sitting empty." Arthur Randy's hand trembled slightly as he flipped to page 15. The other men leaned in, their expressions shifting from amusement to uncertainty. The subsidiary on page 4, Meridian Manufacturing Solutions, was dissolved in bankruptcy court last March, Natalie continued, her voice gaining strength. The case number is 2024 BK 44891. You can look it up. All their assets were liquidated to pay creditors. But somehow it's listed here as a fully operational division contributing $42 million to projected revenue. Kennedy Webb hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His eyes stayed fixed on her face with an intensity that should have frightened her. "And the signature on page 23, Natalie said, quieter now. "The authorization from the CFO. Compare it to the signature on page 31 from the regional director. Same handwriting, same pen pressure patterns, same spacing between letters. One person signed both documents using different names." "This is absurd." Gregory Ashworth stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Kennedy, are you going to let some waitress insult our intelligence with this conspiracy nonsense? She probably read one article about Enron and thinks she's Warren Buffett." But Kennedy Webb raised one hand, and Ashworth went silent immediately. "How do you know about OSHA structural audits?" Webb asked. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "How do you know what pen pressure patterns indicate signature forgery? How does a restaurant server quote case numbers from memory?" Natalie met his gaze. For a moment, she saw something shift behind his eyes, recognition, perhaps, of one predator by another. "That's not the right question, Mr. Webb." She began gathering empty plates, falling back into the rhythm of service. "The right question is why no one on your due diligence team caught any of this, and whether their failure was incompetence or something else." She turned and walked toward the kitchen. Behind her, she heard the rustle of pages turning, the murmur of urgent voices, the sharp intake of breath that meant someone had found exactly what she'd described. What started as a routine dinner was about to become the most important 72 hours of Kennedy Webb's career. The Webb Industrial Holdings building rose 42 stories above downtown, all glass and steel, and the quiet arrogance of old money made new. Natalie had passed it hundreds of times on her way to work, had never once imagined walking through its marble lobby. Now, at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, she stood in an elevator that smelled like expensive leather and ambition. Kennedy Webb had sent a car to her apartment building, a one-bedroom walk-up in a neighborhood his drivers probably locked their doors driving through. The message had been simple. "I need to understand what you know. Name your price for an hour of your time." She'd named no price. She'd simply gotten in the car. The elevator opened onto the 41st floor, and Natalie stepped into chaos wearing yesterday's jeans and a sweater she'd owned since college. Around her, men and women in tailored suits moved with the focused energy of people who believed their spreadsheets held the secrets of the universe. The reception area gleamed with chrome and achievement awards, photographs of Kennedy Webb shaking hands with presidents and prime ministers, and every single person who noticed Natalie looked at her like she'd wandered in from another planet. A young man with an earpiece and a tablet approached, his smile as artificial as the potted plants. "Miss Robinson? I'm Tyler, Mr. Webb's assistant. He's waiting for you in the executive conference room. If you'll follow me?" Natalie followed, aware of eyes tracking her movement. A woman in a Chanel blazer leaned toward her colleague, whispering something that made them both snicker. A security guard's hand drifted toward his radio before Tyler waved him off. At a cluster of desks, 3 analysts looked up from their monitors with expressions that ranged from confusion to outright hostility. "Who let the help upstairs?" The voice was sharp, loud enough to be heard. Natalie didn't turn to identify the speaker. She didn't need to. She'd heard that tone before, in boardrooms, in executive lounges, in every space where people measured worth by net assets and pedigree. Tyler's ears reddened, but he said nothing. The executive conference room occupied a corner of the building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Kennedy Webb sat alone at the head of a table that could seat 20, newspapers and financial reports spread before him like a general's war maps. He looked up as she entered. If he noticed her clothes, her uncertainty, her complete lack of corporate polish, nothing in his expression showed it. "Miss Robinson, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair at his right hand. "Coffee? Water?" "Neither, thank you." Natalie sat, her back straight, her hands steady on the table's polished surface. "You wanted to talk about Meridian?" "I want to talk about you." Webb leaned back, studying her with the same intensity he'd shown at the restaurant. "After you left last night, I had my team verify your claims. Every single one checked out. The factory, the dissolved subsidiary, the matching signatures." He paused. "I also had them look into you." Something cold moved through Natalie's chest, but her expression didn't change. "Natalie Robinson, bachelor's degree from Howard University, magna cum laude. MBA from Wharton, top of your class. Spent 6 years at Morrison Foster as a financial analyst, rising to senior director of risk assessment before your abrupt resignation 3 years ago." Webb's eyes never left her face. "You wrote the fraud detection protocols still used by 3 of the largest investment banks in the country. You testified before Congress on market manipulation. You were, by all accounts, one of the most brilliant financial minds of your generation." Natalie said nothing. "And then you disappeared." Webb's voice softened. "No LinkedIn profile, no publications, no professional network presence whatsoever, just gone. Until you turned up serving $40 appetizers in a restaurant I frequent for private meetings." He leaned forward. "What happened to you, Miss Robinson?" The silence stretched. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual indifferent energy, traffic and ambition and a million small lives grinding forward. "I made someone powerful very angry." Natalie's voice was flat, emotionless. "I discovered fraud at Morrison Foster, major fraud, partners defrauding clients, manipulating markets, destroying evidence. I reported it. I built a case file. I thought the system would work." She paused, remembering. The midnight meetings, the threatening calls, the way colleagues who'd been her friends suddenly couldn't meet her eyes. The system didn't work. The SEC investigation was quietly closed. The partners I accused were protected by people with more power than I understood. And I was destroyed. Natalie's hands pressed harder against the table. "Character assassination. False accusations. Every door in every firm in every city closed before I could knock. I was blacklisted so thoroughly that I couldn't get hired to manage a convenience store register." "So you became a server." "So I survived." Natalie met his eyes with something fierce and unyielding. "I worked jobs that paid cash. I kept my head down, I stayed alive, and I watched." "Watched what?" Everything. Numbers don't stop making sense just because someone takes away your title. Every restaurant I've worked in, every business I've observed, I see the patterns, the discrepancies, the ways people hide what they're really doing with money. Natalie gestured toward the reports on his table. What I saw at Meridian wasn't complicated. It was just invisible to people who've forgotten how to look. Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he gathered the newspapers into a neat pile and pushed them aside. "I believe you," he said, "and I need your help." The door burst open behind them. "Kennedy, what the hell is going on?" A man strode in, all expensive suit and expensive rage. Derek Ashworth, Gregory's younger brother and Webb Industrial's chief investment officer. Behind him came 3 more executives, their faces arranged in matching expressions of outrage and concern. "Security told me you brought some stranger into the building for an unscheduled meeting, some random—" He stopped, staring at Natalie. Recognition flickered and died. "Who is this?" "This is Natalie Robinson," Webb said calmly. "She's going to help us avoid losing $200 million. Derek's laugh was sharp, cruel. "Her? She's the waitress from last night. For God's sake, Kennedy, has Gregory's little joke gotten to your head? She probably memorized some financial terms from YouTube and she identified fraud that your entire due diligence team missed." Webb's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Derek stop mid-sentence. "She found the dissolved subsidiary, the condemned factory, the forged signatures, in approximately 30 seconds of glancing at documents that your people had 6 weeks to analyze." The executives exchanged glances. Natalie saw the calculations happening behind their eyes. Threat assessment, blame allocation, survival positioning. "Kennedy." A woman stepped forward, silver blonde and composed. Catherine Sterling, chief financial officer. "I'm sure Miss Robinson means well, but we can't bring outsiders into sensitive corporate matters based on speculation from a chance restaurant encounter. We have procedures, protocols." "Your procedures failed." Natalie spoke for the first time, and every head swiveled toward her. "Your protocols missed obvious red flags because whoever designed this fraud knew exactly which checks you'd perform. They knew your systems. They knew your blind spots." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "They knew you. What exactly are you suggesting?" Derek's voice was dangerous now. "I'm not suggesting anything." Natalie stood moving to the window, her reflection ghost-like against the city below. "I'm telling you that you have a leak. Someone inside Webb Industrial, someone with access to your investment evaluation processes, has been feeding information to whoever's running the Meridian scheme. They knew what flags to hide, what numbers to inflate, what signatures would pass your verification without scrutiny. That's a serious accusation." Catherine's composure showed fractures. "These are people who've been with this company for decades." "Mr. Webb." Natalie turned to face the room. "I need access to your due diligence files on Meridian, not summaries, originals, emails, internal memos, analyst notes, everything from the first contact through last night's dinner." "Absolutely not." Derek stepped forward, his body blocking the path between Natalie and the table. "You're not an employee. You're not an investigator. You're a waitress with a story and delusions of relevance. Kennedy, I'm calling security." "You'll do no such thing." Webb's voice cracked like a whip. "Miss Robinson saved this company $200 million with information she gathered while serving bread. Imagine what she might find with actual resources." The executives went still. "Tyler." Webb pressed a button on the conference phone. "I need everything we have on the Meridian proposal. Every document, every email, every handwritten note. Bring it to the conference room immediately." "Yes, sir." Derek's face had gone pale with fury. "Kennedy, I must formally object." "Your objection is noted." Webb's eyes were steel. "Now sit down and let Miss Robinson work." 20 minutes later, the conference table was covered with documents. Natalie moved through them with the focused intensity of a surgeon, her eyes scanning numbers, cross-referencing dates, building patterns in her mind that others couldn't see. The executives watched in hostile silence, waiting for her to fail. She didn't fail. Here, Natalie pulled a financial statement from the stack. This quarterly report from Meridian's European division. See the revenue numbers? Catherine leaned forward despite herself. What about them? They show steady growth. 23% year over year. Natalie set another document beside it. But this wire transfer log from your own bank records shows the actual payments received from that division. The numbers don't match. The payments are 60% lower than reported. That could be a timing difference, Derek said. Accrual accounting for 18 consecutive months? Natalie pulled more papers. Every single quarter, the discrepancy is exactly 60%. That's not accounting lag. That's systematic inflation. Someone at Meridian is fabricating revenue and someone at Webb is approving reports they know are false. The silence was absolute. There's more. Natalie spread 3 documents in a row. These internal emails discussing the Meridian evaluation. Notice the distribution list? 4 names. But look at this memo summarizing the same meeting. 5 names attended, but only 4 received the email. She pointed to a signature at the bottom of the memo. Robert Randy, Regional Vice President. His name appears on the meeting attendance, but not on any email chain. He's receiving information through a separate channel. That's... Catherine's voice faltered. That's circumstantial. Is it? Natalie pulled one final document from the stack. This is Robert Randy's authorization on Meridian's initial assessment, the document that started the whole investment proposal. Look at the handwriting on the margin notes. She set it beside the prospectus page she'd mentioned at the restaurant. Same pen pressure, same spacing, same slight tremor on downward strokes. Natalie looked at the executives one by one. Your regional vice president has been forging documents in coordination with Meridian's CFO. He's your leak. Derek's hand was shaking. You can't possibly... Call him. Natalie stepped back from the table. Right now, ask him about the European revenue numbers. Watch his reaction. Webb was already reaching for the phone. Robert Randy arrived 47 minutes later, his face arranged in careful confusion that crumbled the moment he saw the document spread across the conference table. Natalie watched his eyes dart from paper to paper, watched the sweat bead at his temples, watched a career built on deception collapse in real time. The confession took less than an hour. He'd been approached by Meridian's people 18 months ago. A bribe initially, then threats when he'd tried to back out. The scheme was elaborate. Randy filtered information about Webb's evaluation processes. Meridian crafted proposals specifically designed to exploit weaknesses, and a consortium of shadow investors waited to profit from the inevitable market manipulation when Webb's involvement was announced. You would have lost everything, Natalie said quietly as security led Randy away. Not just the investment, the market would have corrected within weeks, and Webb Industrial's reputation for due diligence would have been destroyed. You'd have spent years in litigation. Your stock price would have collapsed. Webb stared at the empty doorway where Randy had disappeared. How did you see all of this? In a restaurant from serving distance? Because I've seen it before. Natalie gathered the documents into a neat pile. Different names, different numbers, same patterns. Fraud isn't creative. It just counts on people not paying attention. The door opened, and Tyler stepped in hesitantly. Sir, the team from the Meridian deal is asking about the delay. They want to know if we're proceeding with tomorrow's signing. Webb looked at Natalie. Tell them no, she said. Tell them the signing is postponed indefinitely for additional due diligence. Watch their reaction. The honest ones will be annoyed. The guilty ones will panic. Webb nodded slowly. Do as she says. Tyler disappeared. Catherine Sterling rose from her chair, her composure rebuilt, but her eyes wary. Miss Robinson, I owe you an apology. We all do. What you've accomplished today is extraordinary. The other executives murmured agreement, sincere, grateful, still slightly bewildered. Natalie said nothing. She'd heard those words before, in other boardrooms, from other powerful people. She'd learned how quickly gratitude could curdle when the immediate crisis passed. There's something else. She moved to the window again, watching the city below. The Meridian scheme isn't the full picture. This morning, I asked Mr. Webb to show me your pending investment portfolio, everything you're considering for the next quarter. Webb nodded. I provided it. You're being targeted. Natalie turned to face the room. Meridian wasn't random. It was designed specifically to exploit your company's investment patterns, your evaluation processes, your internal communication structures. Someone studied you. Someone who knows exactly how you operate. Derek's face went gray. That's just speculation. Is it? Natalie pulled a tablet from the stack of materials, displaying a chart she'd constructed. These are your last 8 major investment considerations. Look at the pattern. 3 were legitimate opportunities, strong companies, solid fundamentals. 5 were variations of the same fraud, calibrated to become slightly more sophisticated each time, testing your defenses. The room went cold. Meridian was supposed to be the final test, Natalie continued. You passed the first 4 traps by accident. Timing, market changes, random due diligence catches. But they learned from each failure. They refined their approach. By the time they designed Meridian, they'd mapped every weakness in your system. She paused. Including Robert Randy. You're saying we've been under attack for months, Catherine said slowly. Systematically. Deliberately. I'm saying someone with very deep pockets and very sophisticated knowledge of your operations has been waging a quiet war against Webb Industrial Holdings. Natalie met Webb's eyes. And until tonight, you didn't even know you were fighting. The silence that followed was the silence of powerful people confronting the limits of their power. What do we do? Webb's voice was barely a whisper. Natalie considered the question. She thought about the 3 years she'd spent invisible, watching, surviving. She thought about the system that had failed her, the people who had destroyed her career for speaking truth. She thought about the choice she was being offered now, to step back into the arena to fight the battles she'd lost before. First, you need to understand what you're facing. Natalie moved to the head of the table where Webb sat. The people behind this don't just want your money. They want to destroy your credibility. Every company that trusted Webb Industrial's reputation, every investor who followed your lead, they're all potential victims. This is a systemic attack designed to undermine market confidence itself. Why? Derek's voice cracked. That's the question you should have been asking from the beginning. Natalie pulled up news reports on the tablet. Look at the companies that have been damaged by similar schemes in the past 2 years. What do they have in common? The executives crowded around, scrolling through articles. Manufacturing firms, investment houses, infrastructure developers, all prominent, all respected, all systematically destroyed. They're all American, Catherine said slowly. Major American companies in critical industries. And who profits when American industry destabilizes? Natalie let the question hang. This isn't corporate greed. This is economic warfare. Meridian and the shadow consortium behind it are tools, weapons in a larger battle that none of you realized was being fought. Webb's face had gone hard. Can you prove this? Not yet. But I can give you the tools to protect yourself. And I can show you how to start fighting back. Natalie paused. If you're willing to trust someone who serves bread for a living. The executives looked at each other. The hostility that had filled the room hours ago was gone, replaced by something more complex, respect, fear, and the desperate hope of people who'd just realized how close they'd come to destruction. Make a list, Webb said finally. Everything you need to complete this analysis. Personnel, resources, access. Tyler will ensure you have it within the hour. Natalie nodded. There's one more thing. I need to address your full executive team, everyone who had access to the Meridian files, everyone who could have been compromised. That's 47 people. Then I'll need a bigger room. The corporate auditorium hummed with tension. 47 executives sat in tiered rows, their faces ranging from curious to defensive to actively hostile. Word had spread about the morning's events: the arrest of Robert Randy, the collapse of the Meridian deal, the mysterious woman who had somehow become the center of it all. Natalie stood alone on the stage, a projector casting numbers across the screen behind her. Her clothes were still wrong for this room: jeans, a sweater, the practical shoes of someone who spent 8 hours on her feet serving food. She looked nothing like the woman who had once commanded boardrooms exactly like this one. You don't know me. Her voice carried without amplification, clear and strong. But I know you. I know how you work, how you think, how you protect yourselves from threats you understand while remaining blind to threats you don't. Someone in the back row snorted. Natalie saw Derek Ashworth lean toward the man, whispering something that made them both smirk. 8 months ago, Robert Randy sat where you're sitting. He attended meetings like this one. He analyzed deals, approved investments, protected the company's interests, and the whole time, he was helping people who wanted to destroy everything Webb Industrial has built. The smirking stopped. I'm not here to accuse anyone. Natalie pulled up the first slide, a timeline of the shadow investments she'd identified. I'm here to show you what I've found, and to ask questions you should have been asking yourselves. What followed was surgical. Natalie walked through the data with the precision of an auditor and the passion of a prosecutor. She showed them the pattern of attacks, each failed scheme teaching the adversary something new, each near miss refining their approach. She showed them the documents Robert Randy had falsified, the emails he'd redirected, the meetings where crucial information had somehow never reached the right people. And she showed them the numbers. Always the numbers. Meridian's prospectus claimed their European division generated $82 million in revenue last year. Natalie displayed the wire transfer logs alongside the financial statements. But actual deposits totaled $33 million. Someone created $49 million of fictional income. That's not an accounting error. That's not a timing difference. That's fraud engineered by people who knew exactly what Webb's due diligence would and wouldn't catch. The room was absolutely silent. Look at page 47. Natalie advanced to a complex diagram of signature analysis. Robert Randy's authorization on the initial Meridian assessment. The handwriting matches the Meridian CFO's supposed signature on page 31. One person wrote both, probably Randy, using samples he obtained from Randy's office. Your internal controls never flagged it because the signatures were on different documents in different review cycles. Someone knew exactly how your verification process worked. Derek Ashworth's face had gone ash-gray. I have a question for the room. Natalie stepped away from the projector, letting the numbers speak for themselves. How many of you reviewed the Meridian proposal before it reached Mr. Webb's desk? Hands rose hesitantly. 17, Natalie counted. 17 people who had held fraudulent documents and seen nothing wrong. How many of you noticed that the Cleveland factory was listed as operational? 17 hands fell. How many of you cross-referenced the subsidiary list against public corporate filings? Silence. How many of you questioned why the projected returns exceeded anything the market had seen in a decade? Nothing. Just the rustle of expensive suits and the quiet sound of confidence crumbling. I'm not asking these questions to embarrass you. Natalie's voice softened. I'm asking because the people who targeted you were counting on exactly this. They knew you'd trust the process. They knew you'd assume someone else had checked the details. They knew that in a room full of brilliant people, no one would actually look. She paused, letting the weight of that settle. You have a choice now. You can treat this as an isolated incident. A bad hire, a rogue employee, a one-time failure of due diligence. You can fire Robert Randy, close the Meridian file, and go back to business as usual. Natalie met Webb's eyes at the back of the room. Or you can accept that you've been at war for 18 months without knowing it. You can recognize that the people behind this are patient, sophisticated, and absolutely determined to destroy you. And you can decide to fight back. With what? Someone called from the middle rows. We're investors, not intelligence agents. With the truth. Natalie advanced to her final slide. A list of recommendations, each one a specific change to Webb Industrial's evaluation processes. Better verification, deeper cross-referencing, independent audits of every major proposal, and above all, a willingness to question what you're being shown instead of assuming you already understand. She powered down the projector. The screen went dark. The same skills that let you build billion-dollar portfolios can protect you from people trying to tear them down. You just have to use them. Natalie stepped back from the podium. Thank you for your time. She walked off the stage and headed for the door. Behind her, Kennedy Webb stood. Miss Robinson. His voice carried across the auditorium, and every head turned to watch. You've saved this company from disaster. You've exposed corruption we didn't know existed. You've shown us weaknesses we need to fix. He walked down the aisle toward her, ignoring the whispers that followed in his wake. I'd like to offer you a position. Senior Advisor for Fraud Prevention and Risk Assessment. Name your salary. Natalie stopped at the door. She turned, looking at Webb, looking at the executives who had dismissed her hours ago and now watched her with something like awe. She thought about acceptance. She thought about security, about relevance, about the chance to do meaningful work with real resources behind her. She thought about everything she'd lost and everything she could rebuild. Mr. Webb. Natalie's voice was quiet, but it carried. 2 hours ago, I was a waitress. Your people looked at me like I'd crawled out of the garbage. They whispered about me. They laughed at me. They couldn't imagine that someone who looked like me, dressed like me, lived like me, could possibly have anything worth hearing. The room went still. You're offering me a job because I saved you money. That's fair. That's business. Natalie's eyes moved across the faces of the executives. Some guilty, some defensive, some genuinely ashamed.